The batch for the worldwide anniversary has been announced officially by Bandai. The Sugofest will be arriving on the 25th of this month, and the Sugofest will actually feature the Blackbeard Pirates, with Blackbeard himself and Jesus Burgess headlining the Sugofest as the two new legends. To complete the batch, we will also be getting 4 new rare recruits from the Blackbeard Pirates as well. Will these two legends both be anniversary specific legends, which means only pullable during anniversary Sugofests? We actually do not yet know that for sure, but at least one of them will certainly be anniversary specific. And if one of them will be out of the two, it will definitely be Blackbeard, but we have to wait and see. Maybe both of them will be. I have to mention my suspicion though, and I think it is also pretty likely, based on the advertising Bandai is doing, and also based on some leaks, that this worldwide anniversary will be structured very similarly to last year's normal anniversary. What I think can happen is this. We are going to now get Blackbeard and Burgess, one of them being anniversary specific in Blackbeard, the other one being a normal legend. And then after the 3-part Sugofest here, we are going to see another set of legends and rare recruits get released in another Sugofest labeled as Worldwide Anniversary, but this time it will be another character's part. Because as you can see here in their official tweet, Bandai says Blackbeard Celebration, not just Worldwide Anniversary Celebration. If you were playing last year, you definitely remember the 9th anniversary structure, which in my opinion was extremely poor. We got Luffy Yamato and Oden Toki, one of them Super Sugo, the other just an anniversary legend. Then in 2 to 3 weeks, we got Ifrit Sanji, a Super Sugo with Queen, a normal legend. And then after 2 to 3 weeks, we got King of Hell Zoro with Albert. Again, one Super Sugo, one normal legend. This is also likely to happen now, since we see this one labeled as a Blackbeard Celebration. Have in mind, it will happen in a smaller scale, since these will not be Super Sugofests. We are not going to get Super Sugofest legends. Another indication to me that that structure might be the case is because we see the duration of the Sugofest. It begins on the 25th of this month, ending on the 13th of April. Definitely enough time for Bandai to follow the Luffy part, Sanji part, Zoro part structure and go with villains this time. Starting with Blackbeard, then we get 2 more or 1 more set of legends, since this is not the big anniversary of the year. Now let's get to the characters. Starting with Blackbeard. He will be strength driven and powerhouse. Finally, and thank God, Bandai decided that Blackbeard doesn't only need to be int. He is also super tandem and driven superclass. His super tandem is actually not that great, nothing out of the ordinary. But let's talk about his captain ability. We see that he can allow normal attacks to ignore defensive effects of enemies, but he also cancels our defensive effects. Just like Gear 5 Luffy does in his Gear 5 state. That can be extremely useful. You can ignore threshold or damage reduction and even barriers, no defense up though, but you cannot gain a damage reduction shield, threshold or stuff like that. You can gain the buffs, but they don't work. You gain something, you lose something, it is absolutely fair in my opinion, and the positives can far outweigh the negatives, depending on the situation of course. If you really need to survive a big chunk of damage, most likely you are not going to use this Blackbeard as your captain, or you are going to counter the damage with Overheal. He specifically boosts driven and powerhouse characters' attack and HP. He makes Dex Q and Tandem Orbs have matching slot effects, which is very good. And actually, if the crew has a fighter, slasher, a striker and a shooter in it, then it boosts driven and powerhouse characters by 0.75 times more. That is actually pretty good, and I like the fact that it's not a necessity for him to boost you in general. Like Carrot, it's not a half and half boost. If you have these classes, you get the extra boosting. If you don't, it's fine. You just get the 5 times flat attack boost, which is still definitely acceptable. On top of that, the final part of his captain ability says that if the crew applies threshold with a special, a support or a swap do not count, then he converts that threshold to boosts damage dealt to increase damage taken enemies, so a conditional attack boost for one turn. This is actually very good combined with the part where we can't get a threshold anyway, it cancels out, so if we happen to get one, he makes it into a conditional attack boost, which is great. Even though it doesn't have specific utility to remove despair or bind, it still has the utility of ignoring defensive effects, so I am not going to fault him for not having extra utility. I think his captain ability is actually pretty strong. His special ability is multi-layered with a lot of requirements for different specific effects. So the first part, if the enemy has 6 or more turns of threshold or damage reduction, the rainbow shield, he applies increased damage taken, ignoring immunity, which in first glance seems limited and something that, sure, is a welcomed addition to the special, but at the same time not something we can get consistently. Well, from his superclass, he can actually apply damage reduction to the enemy for 6 turns, which is extremely good simply because it means we can apply damage reduction to the enemy ourselves with Blackbeard's superclass, then activate his special to also apply increased damage taken through immunity, because the enemy will have 6 turns of damage reduction, the 6 turns we applied. Then, from his captain ability, we can ignore the damage reduction we gave the enemy to just attack through it. On top of that, if we can get threshold, then we can also get a conditional attack boost versus the increased damage taken we applied ignoring immunity, making this a very good synergy for this Blackbeard. The part I am not certain about is if the enemy already has damage reduction, can we still give the damage reduction from the superclass or no? Will we increase the turns or just apply a different damage reduction, depending on how much of a percentage of a damage reduction shield the enemy has? Because Blackbeard applies an 80% one, so if the enemy has a 90% one, do we just add a separate damage reduction shield? If the enemy has an 80% one, do we add on top of it, or is it impossible to add the damage reduction shield? I am not sure about that. The superclass does mention this effect is treated as launching damage reduction effect. Does that clear it up? Not really. So if the enemy has damage reduction and we can't add Blackbeard's 6 turn one, if the enemy has 5 turns for example, then this whole synergy is inconsistent. If we can add Blackbeard's damage reduction no matter the case, this is amazing. Let's continue because we have more to unpack here. The next requirement, if the crew has 5 or more of the same orbs, from Strength, Dex, QRCV and Tandem orbs, then he boosts Strength Driven and Powerhouse characters slot effects by 3 for 3 turns, and the effect cannot be removed by our crew or the enemies, which is great. Very good orb boost, it cannot be removed even through removal of beneficial effects or interruptions, which is simply extremely strong. We can carry it over through stages because it is 3 turns, being 3 times is also very high, but is it easy, the requirement to achieve? I think it's not the hardest. We can get a full board of tandem slots, we can get a full board of strength slots, generally we can manipulate our slots in multiple ways, so I think it won't be something impossible. Definitely a good addition. On top of the orb boost, we also get a buff in our already existing attack boost, if it exists, and we get a guaranteed tandem slot on Blackbeard. The next requirement is if the crew has 5 or more of the same orbs from block, psi and int, so the ones that are the most common ones and not mentioned in the previous requirement. Then he changes all orbs into empty and changes the damage output of empty orbs to 2.25 times. That happens for 3 turns, and then he also gives us the orb boost, still the same exact one, but for 1 turn, not 3. So having the other slots is most likely better. It will depend on the situation, but getting a 3 turn orb boost is better if we can get it, But of course, if we don't need the 3-turn Ore boost, also getting a higher damage output from our matching slots and the same value of an Ore boost can still be good. What happens with his special if we can't meet any of the requirements? Then we get a 2.75 times of an Ore boost for 1 turn, and he applies increased damage taken for 1.75 times, but not going through immunity. So essentially the special is trash and he's not worth using. We should focus on fulfilling requirements to get the max we can out of him. And from his special, other than I guess the slot manipulation he can provide, he has zero utility. From his superclass though, he can, as I said, apply the damage reduction, but on top of that, he removes 6 turns of defense up, which is insanely good, since it is the defensive effect that he cannot ignore with his captain ability, and he also increases his superclass from 1.2 times of a base attack boost to all the driven units to 1.5 times, which is definitely a good addition, and it is also something new in One Piece Treasure Cruise. We have never seen it before. It is not extremely amazing though, but his superclass is definitely still very good. Is it easy to get access to it though? Because we see a lot of units wanting perhaps 2 characters or other difficult stuff to actually fulfill. But no, I think Blackbeard is very simple. He just wants one of his crewmates in the crew and he will get access to his superclass. He also gets it if 5 or more characters with the potential limit break ability to reduce increased damage taken from our crew are present, which I guess is good to have an alternative to his crewmates, because not a lot of Blackbeard pirates are present in One Piece Treasure Cruise with a plethora of units like the Straw Hats, but now they are going to get more units, so that is definitely a plus, and the new rare recruits from the bats will also definitely help. His support is also decent. He can be attached to his crewmates, the Blackbeard pirates, and if with the special they can manipulate slots, then he removes 3 turns of defense up. That removal coming from a support is definitely very good. The problem here is, 1, not a lot of Blackbeard pirates can actually manipulate slots, so there's not a plethora of options for you. But on top of that, if you have this Blackbeard, wouldn't you just prefer to use him as captain instead, to use his 6 turn defense up removal from the superclass ability? Why just use him as support? I guess it is for the situation where you actually can't use him as captain. Maybe you can't get special cooldown reduction in a Kizuna or something like that. Overall, I think this Blackbeard is a very interesting character. He has so much going for him. He is also kind of complicated to team build around, I guess you can say, compared to someone like Roger Oden, where it is way simpler. But with Blackbeard, in my opinion, you do need to fulfill his different requirements to get the maximum you can out of him. Also, it is extremely important to learn if his damage reduction application to the enemy goes through no matter what, because if it doesn't, in my opinion, he loses a lot of value, because he will depend on other units to remove the enemy's damage reduction first before he applies his damage reduction. Just to be safe for the rating, I think he has high potential. I will give him 4 out of 5 stars. Let's move on to the other legend of the bats, Jesus Burgess. He is considerably less complicated than Blackbeard, so let's talk about him in faster fashion as well. As a captain, he reduces strength character special charge by 1 turn at the start of the quest, and if you are driven or fighter, he reduces by a further 1 turn. He boosts attack by 5.5 times for strength driven and fighter units, which is a very good attack boost, and HP by 1.4 times, which is also very strong. Tapping on this character with a strength tandem or empty slot reduces crew's attack down and attack down under specific chain by 10 turns. He also reduces the enemy barriers by 1 turn. The utility he has in his captain ability is incredible, but the problem is that he doesn't just remove the debuffs, he needs to be tapped with a specific slot. The good thing is that he can provide everyone a strength slot from his special, even through block slots. Removing 10 turns of attack down and attack down under a specific chain is extremely good. The only other unit in the game that can remove attack down under a specific chain from their captain ability is Ace. I think actually no special except Sirahoshi Mansery and the V1 Straw Hats type can remove attack down under a specific chain, so we can see how valuable this ability can be, especially with how often we see the debuff lately. With his special ability now, he can completely remove attack down, which is amazing. He can reduce all enemies' damage reduction by 100%. So just like we see with defense up being able to be reduced by 100%, Burgess does that but for damage reduction. The thing is that now something that will also be included in full immunity? Because if it is, the value of the reduction definitely decreases. Someone could definitely say here, why didn't they just allow him to completely remove damage reduction, right? Well, the reason here is because of Blackbeard's superclass, because if you completely remove the enemy's damage reduction, then Blackbeard cannot ignore immunity to apply increased damage taken. On top of that, he himself has a requirement in his special later on, where 6 turns of damage reduction need to be present, and he can give you extra stuff. So if he completely would remove damage reduction, that would kind of mess up the unit itself, not just the combo with Blackbeard possibly. He can manipulate all slots, even blocked, very good slot manipulation, and if the enemy does have the 6 turns or more of damage reduction or threshold, he gives to strength driven and fighters 3 turns of a 3 times attack boost, something that cannot be removed by the crew or the enemies, which is awesome. On top of that, 3 turns of a chain boost for plus 1.6 times, also amazing. If the enemy does not have the 6 turns of damage reduction or threshold, he then provides 2 turns of a 2.75 attack boost and no chain boost. From his strength super type actually, he can also provide 3 turns of a base attack boost for strength driven and fighter. He can also completely remove paralysis and slot bind from that, but only for himself, so the utility is not that great. The thing is that with Blackbeard, this unit is such an amazing combination, because we get something from 2 units that resembles Uta. We get a 3 turn attack boost or boost, chain boost, maybe even matching slots if we have the ability to lock them, and a base attack boost if Blackbeard and Burgess are both in the captain position. This can be extremely strong, especially because the attack boost and the orb boost are for 3 times and they cannot be removed. Of course, without depending on Blackbeard's superclass, Burgess loses strength because he cannot really give you the 3 turn attack boost, simply because it will be extremely situational based on the quest mechanics, because he cannot apply damage reduction to the enemy himself. It is pretty easy to get access to his super type, of course. He just needs Blackbeard or someone else from the Blackbeard Pirates as a member of the crew. With his support, he can also be attached to Blackbeard and the rest of the Blackbeard Pirates. He can remove 2 turns of attack down if the attached unit uses a special to change slots, which can be decent, but again, just like Blackbeard, if you do have Burgess, maybe you just want to use him, not as a support, but in the actual crew. He also has a final tap ability, which is fine, but nothing super amazing. Overall, this Burgess is definitely an extremely good combination with Blackbeard. That is how he is designed at the end of the day. Even as a standalone unit though, he can be extremely helpful because of his amazing utility. I have to give out a disclaimer though before my rating. If him reducing the opponent's damage reduction to 0% doesn't just go through immunity and can be stopped by full immunity, he loses 1 star of value. But currently I think I will rate Burgess's first legend with 4 out of 5 stars. The first rare recruit of the batch is up next, Catarina Devon. She can remove 6 turns of special bind while also resisting it, and once again, just like Burgess, she also has the requirement of 6 turns or more of damage reduction or threshold being present. If it is present, she can boost the color affinity of driven characters by 2.25 times for 3 turns, which is very good, but if it's not present for 6 or more turns, then she removes damage reduction by 5 turns. On top of that, she can delay enemies by 2 turns, not going through immunity, and she can change adjacent orbs to character's own type while also locking all of the crew's slots. There is definitely a common theme between the rare recruits of these bats. Combined with Blackbeard, they have the ability to be very strong, but without him they are much dependent on the 6 turns of damage reduction and threshold being present to provide the damage. Otherwise, we are going to see utility, but the thing is that for Catarina Devon's case, she removes 5 turns of damage reduction, not 6, but 6 turns of silence. This can definitely be an awkward situation, leaving you in need of one more turn of damage reduction removal in some cases, and I guess you can say she compensates and also locks slots while also providing some slight slot manipulation, but I can't give her more than the average rating of 3 out of 5 stars. Vasco Shot is up next, and he is very similar to Catarina Devon. If the captain is driven, he provides 2 turns of special cooldown reduction, which can be very strong special cooldown reduction, but only for the driven class. Then, if 6 turns of threshold or damage reduction are present, he can provide chain boundaries for 3 turns, which can be very strong, but again extremely situational and dependent on Blackbeard or the quest mechanics. If we don't have 6 turns present, then he reduces threshold by 5 turns. On top of that, he heals for 15,000 HP, changes adjacent slots to matching, and reduces burn by 6 turns. The structure of his special is very similar to Catarina Devon, even though they do different things. Chain boundaries can be considered stronger than color affinity, but at the same time his utility combination is kind of worse. I think he also will take the average rating of 3 out of 5 stars. Next up we have Doc Q. He can reduce bind by 6 turns and change all orbs, including block orbs, to his own orb. The unique thing about him is that he can actually act kind of as a Blackbeard superclass to apply the 6 turns of damage reduction to the enemies. So he can also kind of enable the other rare recruit effects, and as we can see, all of them are kind of dependent on each other to synergize perfectly at their maximum potential, which definitely is a disadvantage on each one as standalone rare recruits, but can also work to their benefit if you pull multiple of them because they work very well with each other, which also makes sense. Finally, he can apply resistance drops and weaken status to the enemy, and obviously his utility combination or even damage is not the best, but just because he can act as the enabler of applying 6 turns of damage reduction to the enemy, I will also give him the average rating of 3 out of 5 stars. The final rare recruit of the bunch is Augur, and he's unique just like Doc Q because he can be the enabler and apply 6 turns of damage reduction to the enemy. He is also the unit that provides threshold to the team, which if Blackbeard is captain, he can make into a conditional attack boost. On top of that, he manipulates his slot into a tandem one, even if it's blocked, and reduces despair by 6 turns. He can provide 3 turns of a base attack boost or increase the current base attack boost by plus 500, and he also drops resistances. Without Blackbeard, let's not kid ourselves, he is not that great. But to be honest, he might be one of the most important rare recruits simply because he can give threshold to the team, so Blackbeard can give us the conditional attack boost, and then he can apply increased damage taken through immunity, and then we can just increase our damage by a lot, right? But again, without Blackbeard and outside of their bat synergy, these rare recruits can definitely be considered below average or even useless in a lot of situations. So I will also give him the average rating of 3 out of 5 stars. And that is my rating for the worldwide anniversary Blackbeard bats. What do you think? Tell me in the comments down below. As of now, of course, it's not a must pull and we have to wait and also see the Sugofest structure. I will most likely make a video on the worldwide Sugofest as well, analyzing everything you need to know about it. Subscribe to not miss out on that. If you enjoyed this video and my analysis on the upcoming bats, definitely leave a like, I would really appreciate it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.